Hey everybody, I wanted to go live here why Bitcoin is in a free fall. So I figured I'd do that now. Uh, Everybody's basically texting me or hit me up on what's going on. So I wanted to talk about it as a trader and kind of give you insight of what's happening. So hopefully you're not panicking out of it if you're in it, but if you are, that's probably a normal feeling. When I'm looking at the charts of Bitcoin, I start always at the weekly chart. So if you're new to charting, this might not make any sense to you. But I've done several videos on this if you follow me on YouTube. We had this breakout that happened from this big bottoming pattern, this big rounded bottom. And if I move this red line down here, you can see that was the high resistance area back here in about 2013. And then it just sold off for a while and then built this phenomenal rounding pattern. Then it broke out here recently in April 2017 from 1,196, and that went parabolic, as we can see, all the way up to 20,000. The retracements in between were only down probably 25%, and then they were met immediately with buying over the next several weeks. Moving much, much higher, down and then move much, much higher. And you notice the downtime is very short. This is such a fast market and such a thinly traded market because, again, Bitcoin only has 21 million ever to be created and only 16 million in circulating supply. And we have a couple whales in from Tim Draper to Mike Novogratz who have, billions of dollars of, they're billionaires, and they can move this market very quickly. So anytime you get a shakeout like this, it's a healthy thing. It gets rid of the weak holders, the greedy people, the people that are in for the wrong reason. I didn't get into this to make money. I got into this to hedge against risk in the global economy because at the end of the day, what's happening is the governments and the banks are pillaging the people. And the philosophy behind Bitcoin was to create trust, to create a way through mathematics where we can trust each other instead of person to person. We're looking at it more as a trust through mathematics that makes sure that we have a ledger that is clean and that will execute accordingly. And that's what I got into it for. So anyway, looking at this, we're on the weekly chart right now. You can see I drew a trend line here off of the September lows and off of the November lows and projected it outward. And looking at that, we could still come all the way back down to that point. You can see the purple line is the 9-period moving average. And this is what Bitcoin has followed for some time, but it has dropped below it and then popped back above it. Dropped below it, popped back above it. So right now, it came down close to it. It bounced, but I'm going to show you what the bounce is based on in a minute. The volume here on the sells are pretty heavy. You can see here the volume's pretty high so far on the weekly chart for the sell. It's not eclipsed this buy area over here yet, but it is still a strong selling. We're down 3,700 to 11,900 on the Bitcoin. That's almost, from 20,000, that's quite a fall. MACD still has not crossed to the downside on the weekly chart. But we have broken this upward trend line I drew on the daily. So let's go over the daily chart and take a look at it. So on the daily chart, we can see MACD has crossed down. Volume has accelerated greatly on the down sells, which means people are dumping Bitcoin, or somebody's dumping Bitcoin, and they're doing it heavy. They're a little bit panicked, it looks like. There's a lot of volume. I said it would bounce off the 50-day moving average, and I even put Fibonacci on. If you're not familiar with Fibonacci, Leonardo Fibonacci was a mathematician who could use both sides of his brain, and basically he was able to see that everything had patterns in the universe, and the patterns work in the stock market. So this is a retracement down to the green level is a 61.8% retracement. It coincides with the 50-period moving average, which is in the stock market called the institutional moving average. It's the one that's looked at. If it holds above that, that's your long-term moving average that says the trend is still intact. As long as we stay above the 50-period moving average on a closing basis, it might find some support there. Then we're still probably in an uptrend long-term. If we close below the 50-period moving average, then we have gone bearish. And when we go bearish, that's a big sell signal. So a close below this red line would be a big sell signal. So people have been asking, am I buying right now? No. I mean, I was going to put an order in to buy at the 50. But one thing I learned in the dot-com crash is I bought early and then it continued to crash. So I would rather be late into the party than early into the collapse, early into the thinking that it's going to go higher. So looking at this, we can go down to even a smaller time frame on the chart. Okay, so this is a daily chart. We've been going up, big moves. The down days were being bought. We had a sideways consolidation with these dojis. Then we broke out to new highs. And then we had two more dojis, very similar over here, but there was not a lot of selling or buying. That was indecision. Then we had this closing downward, closing below the dojis. That was the first sign that we're probably going down. And then, of course, the trend line here, it bounced off the trend line a little bit, hung out, but then as of the next candle, it just opened and continued to fall heavier, which is healthy, just so you know. Warren Buffett always said, buy when people are greedy, buy when people are fearful, sell when people are greedy. And when there's blood in the streets and everybody's selling everything, that's when you want to be buying. But again, I'm looking at this as a long-term hold position. This is not something I'm trying to trade. If you're trying to trade it with these markets, they're thin. It's too much time, too much time consumption. You have to move between indices. It's not easy right now to be able to trade this. So if you're a believer in the philosophy of Bitcoin, which is decentralization of power, taking back the money from the bankers, from the politicians, getting the control back into our hands through technology, so we are not puppets on somebody else's string, then this is a coin that gives you that ability through decentralization of power. Same with Monero and some of these coins that are all about decentralization. A lot of the other coins are just popping up to make money. They have no value in regard to the original idea of Bitcoin was bred out of the collapse in the real estate markets and the credit crisis of 2007 and 8. And that is what I got into it for. I have a distrust of the government. I have a distrust of bankers. And therefore, I want mathematics to be the area that has trust through everybody's computers working together to verify the data to make sure whatever we're putting out there of value is trustworthy. And it's not based on one person's opinion. It's based on mathematics and the community itself policing each other. We don't need bankers. We don't need politicians. We need to wake up to our self-governance, our self-reliance, and our sovereign rights as people. And technology will allow us to do it in a way that's not crazy, a way that allows, checks and balances through technology and mathematics. And that's why I got involved. And so if that's not why you're involved, then, you might want to look at other things, because definitely trading this market is not going to be probably that easy. So I'm a long-term buyer and holder of cryptos that make sense, that I think there's value in, to some degree. And a lot of these are going to wipe out, and I think this is good, and it'll get rid of a lot of these. This might be the first step to get rid of a lot of these crappy companies and these, sharks and snakes that are out there trying to sell their crappy little companies and make money. So anyway, enough on the soapbox. Let's go down to another time frame. Let's go to the 4-hour. So the 4-hour time frame, I drew a little trend line off of this. You can see we're still in the downtrend. And the bar has gotten bigger and the volume is still accelerating. Potentially it could come down to this trend line right here, which as you saw I drew. These are different types of trend lines based on time. So this one could come all the way down to the 8,500 mark, or somewhere between 8 and 9,000. Potentially that could happen. And if it breaks that, then we have some real problems, because that is a pretty long-term trend line there. All right, so we see MACD here has gotten weaker and weaker. As it continued to go up, the MACD was getting weak, which kind of gave you an idea, if you're looking at the 4-hour chart, that we have this high on MACD and we had a high on the Bitcoin as well. So I think of MACD, it's called moving average convergence divergence. MACD is really I call it fuel in the tank of your rocket. So if it's adding fuel, that we have higher prices and MACD is going higher, that's confirming the move. However, when prices go higher, which they did here, but MACD did not make a new high, that is telling you the fuel is running out. So if you're looking at the 4-hour chart, you would have said, wow, you know what? Even though we have higher prices, I'm not seeing confirmation in the MACD. That would have been an exit signal or a signal to, stop buying and definitely protect your profits. If you're trading it, that's the way you would look at that, okay? And you can even go down to a shorter time frame. If we went down like to the 15-minute time frame, we can see here there's been some buying and then some more selling. So we hit, bam. So until we break through this trend line, this trend's still on its way down, okay? So we're still kind of in motion here going down, and I'm just keeping my eye on it to see when it starts to exhaust itself on the downside. Eventually all the sellers fall out. There's nobody left to sell. The only people left are buyers. Then it will turn around and start going back up. But you still have a bunch of fearful people in the markets. Remember, a lot of people in the market have not been through the bear market collapse of 2000, 1987, the real estate market collapse. So they have not experienced the bubble. They've experienced the greed, and they're going to realize how quickly you can lose money, especially when you have a thinly traded market. Coinbase and Gemini probably have been bottlenecked because when you get so much panic and they're relatively new exchanges, people don't know how to get out, and therefore getting out becomes very hard. All right, so if you're ever going to get out, you should be getting out along the way as you go up. When everybody's buying, you should be selling pieces along the way. But definitely you don't want to be getting out when everybody's selling because you're going to be stuck. It's like a hurricane here in Florida. Once everybody is evacuating, the roads are stuck. You can't move. If you're smart, you leave early, right? And that's kind of the process. So this is going to continue for a while, it looks like. It looks like we're not done going down. We have acceleration in volume on the 15-minute chart. You can see here that we have higher volume surges and prices going down. So that's showing you there's more selling happening as we go. Again, the 15-minute is noise, so I like to look at the daily chart just to see where we're at. And let's see. There's people that bought it off that 50, and they're still okay right now. But this is the 50-period moving average right here. It really needs to hold above that to stay in a bullish trend. If it breaks that, then we are probably heading down to this longer-term trend line here. Okay, so that's the focus to see where it's going to take us. If I go out to the weekly chart, I could even draw a bigger, longer trend line. Let's just take a look. So there's the weekly, and I just went from early on. I could take this back. And that goes all the way back to 2017 in July. But if we want to do a bigger picture on this, we could actually look at a longer term trend line that we start way back earlier on here. Let me just bring it up. So if I wanted to look at the bottom of this rounded bottom, down here, for example, we had a sideways movement, but then we started creating higher highs and higher lows. You can see here, and I could zoom in to do this a little bit more clear, but this is really, really the long-term trend line right there. So looking at that, we have a couple potential areas that we could fall to on the trend. Now keep in mind, there are horizontal levels of support and resistance as well, but I don't want to confuse anybody on here because if you haven't traded before, it'll just fill up with a bunch of lines and it'll be very confusing. But like these are areas of old resistance become new support. Old resistance becomes new support. So I could put horizontal levels on as well. But I just want you to see the trend lines. So it could come down here, down to this is the 50-week moving average. That's a long way away. So it's something right now I'd be watching and just seeing how the day continues with Bitcoin. People have been asking me, should I buy now? Well, I'm not buying right now. I mean, I'm looking to buy, but I'm not going to buy until I see an exhaustion of the way down. I want to see it's resting, and then there's some interest in it, and it turns back up, and then you can pretty much look to buy. But again, when it turns back up, it could easily turn back down. So you've got to ask yourself, are you in this thing for the long term, 2, 3, 4 years, because you anticipate the technology and the fact that the big money's still going to come in and the masses still haven't been in yet, and technology is going to get easier to use, or are you in this to try to make a quick buck? And if you're going to try to make a quick buck, this is really a hard market to do it. because of the exits. All right. So hopefully that helps you guys understand where we're at right now. But potentially we could come all the way back down to this trend line here before it even turns. So we're looking for like a change of direction like we've seen over here. It might follow the trend line again and slow down as it wipes some people out. But anyway, I hope you enjoyed it, guys. Give me a thumbs up if you like it. If you have any questions, put it below. Please subscribe to the channel, and talk to you soon.